Welcome to the latest episode of the EastFlank Podcast. Today we are talking about defense spending across NATO's eastern flank. It's a very timely topic, especially in our region, given the tense international situation and the proximity of Russia. There is also a strong political context because Donald Trump has once again brought defense spending back into the spotlight, questioning both the relevance of NATO's and the level of commitment, military and financially, among its allies. During his previous presidency, Donald Trump made the allies to commit to the 2% of GDP target, and it was agreed back in 2014 after Russia's annexation of Crimea. Now, in his current term, the bar has been raised again. After the NATO summit in The Hague in 2025, allies set a new goal of 5% of GDP, with 3.5% for core military spending and 1.5% for broader security. And today, we are going to talk about how countries on NATO's eastern flank are dealing with this challenge. As always, we are building today's discussion around our collaborative article written by journalists from 9 countries on NATO's eastern flank. This time, the text is dedicated to defense spending, and you will find the link in the podcast description. Joining me today are Natalia Sileńska from Slovakian EU Brief news outlet and Romanian journalist Sebastian Rotaru from Express Romania. My name is Olga Jurkowska. I'm from Focus Europe Poland. Right at the start, it is worth noting that at this point, all countries on NATO's eastern flank meet the 2% of GDP defense spending target, and some go well beyond it. I'd like to start our discussion with Poland, as Poland has been one of NATO's top spenders for years, especially after 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. Poland hit the 2% target already in 2015 and stayed around that level for a while. The big jump came after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and then the spending went up to over 3% in 2023 and is now close to 4.5%, with plans to reach 4.8% in 2026. Poland is no longer alone at the top because countries like Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are now planning to spend around 5% or even more, and Lithuania is aiming to spend 5.3% of GDP in 2026. And that's not a coincidence because the countries that feel most directly threatened by Russia are the ones spending the most. And in Poland, the sense of threat is very real, so higher defense spending has strong political and public support. And my question is, what it looks like in Slovakia and Romania. Natalia, with Robert Fico returning to power, the approach to defense spending has shifted, but Slovakia has agreed to this 5% spending target so far. But there is no clear timeline, and there are no concrete steps set how to get there. So I would like to ask you, is the current government avoiding a real increase in defense spending? And what did it look like before?
First of all, thank you for having me. Yes, indeed. Slovakia currently spends around 2% of GDP on defense and therefore is meeting the previous NATO target. But Robert Fico government has been repeatedly arguing that reducing the high public deficit remains the main priority, and therefore there is no place for a significant raise in defense spending in near future. The government even says that should any raise beyond the 2% occur, it should happen by means of a dual-use project. But we cannot say altogether that there is nothing happening in Slovakia. We have a defense minister, Robert Kaliňák, who is known for initiating quite several defense purchases. However, experts and opposition frequently criticize them for being non-transparent, ineffective, or just being overpriced. Examples of this are recent reconstruction of new defense ministry headquarters or a new military hospital in Prešov. So in practice, the Fico government appears to be leaving this issue of reaching 5% of GDP to the next administration that will emerge from the parliamentary elections in autumn 2027. And the government isn't eager to have defense as a priority also for ideological reasons, but I think we will get to that later.
Yeah.
Answering the question, what did it look like before the fourth Fico cabinet? Well, with Slovakia having such a bad reputation now for being led by pro-Russian politicians, many people already don't remember that before Fico, everything was quite the opposite. For example, Fico stopped state military aid to Ukraine, but under the previous government of Eduard Heger, which ruled from 2021 to 2023, Slovakia supported Kiev very strongly and was amongst the first to give Ukrainians fighter jets MiG-29 or surface-to-air missile systems S-300. It also launched multiple modernization projects for our army, and we reached 2% of GDP target sooner than many of our allies. And also, this government of Eduard Heger kept communicating to the public that Russia poses a danger to us and the EU, which is something we don't hear from the current government at all. So the last sentence for me is that this is a bit of advice from us. Be careful who you vote for, because everything can change accordingly.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have elections next year, and we are also have this kind of a feeling that we need to be very careful about who we are voting for. Sebastian, Romania aims to significantly boost defense spending, but faces a large budget deficit. So I would like to ask you, what is the political and public climate around this? And is there a strong pressure to increase spending? And how the approach to defense changed over the years?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. So Romania broadly aligns with the European push to increase defense spending through the SAFE program. But its internal political consensus is more fragile and less openly debated than in some other EU countries. Another important factor right now is political instability between liberals and social democrats. Recent government tensions and crises raise concerns about continuity in implementing SAFE.
Yeah. But could you say more about the amount of money you are spending? I mean, the percentage of GDP, and what are the aims for 2026 regarding the defense spending target, the NATO defense spending target, the 5% target?
Yes, the Russian invasion of Ukraine marked a turning point in Romania's political approach to defense spending. So right now we have a commitment around 2% of GDP, and that became a more urgent and expanded priority. So in last years, Romania increased its defense budget, roughly 2.5 of GDP, and began framing military investments as an immediate necessity.
And okay, so now we can move to defense priorities, because there is no doubt, as you both mentioned, that the war against Ukraine, along with geopolitical instability, has exposed serious weakness in the defense capabilities, both of NATO and of European Union. And given the growing tensions within NATO and uncertainty about the alliance's future, the European Union is stepping up its role, and they are aiming towards a greater strategic autonomy. And I would like to say that Poland strongly supports these efforts at the EU level, although we don't have a political consensus around this in Poland, because the presidential camp tends to be more strongly pro-transatlantic, and the government of Donald Tusk is at the same time pushing for stronger defense capabilities within the European Union itself. And the main priorities at the moment are high defense spending, as I mentioned before, because there is political and public consensus in Poland around this, modernizing the army, increasing the number of soldiers, and also a very important key point is keeping a balance between the relations with the United States and the EU, because the presence of United States troops in Poland is strategically very important, but there is still strong focus on supporting Ukraine and strengthening the EU's own resilience. And Donald Tusk, I don't know if you heard about, but he said last week, it was during a summit in Cyprus, but that he said that in an interview with Financial Times, that EU should strengthen its own mutual defense clause. I mean, this Article 42.7. And Tusk also raised the question, very openly raised the question about how really reliable the US is when it comes to Article 5 of NATO. He warned that in case of a Russia attack on NATO country, this could be a matter of months, not years. This is a very strong statement. And it shows that making the security of the Eastern flank a priority for the entire EU is a key strategic goal for Polish current government. And we also, as Poland, as a government, during the EU presidency last year in 2025, we also strongly advocated for the creation of SAFE mechanism, but we'll come back to SAFE mechanism in a moment. Now I would like to highlight that in Poland, the defense and the defense spending is a very serious and urgent topic right now. And I would like to ask you, what kind of approach dominates in your countries? What are the main priorities? Because I assume that for Romania, Black Sea security would be clearly a key issue. Sebastian, would you agree to that?
Yes, I agree, because Romania sees the Black Sea as a buffer zone between NATO and Russia. And the presence of Russian invasion of Ukraine has turned the region into a direct security concern. From a military perspective, the Black Sea is central to deterrence because Romania relies on NATO to maintain balance in the region, particularly through air policing, naval presence, and joint exercises. We also host allied forces and infrastructure, which increase the strategic relevance with NATO's eastern flank.
Okay, and could you tell me, do you have a political consensus on whether you should stick more to the NATO and United States when it comes to defense priorities, or also support European autonomy, strategic autonomy in this respect? Because in Poland, there are slight tensions around this, that the president has slightly different views than the government.
If we are listening to our president Nicu Șordan or pro-Europeans parties, Romania's military relationship is primarily with the United States, and that's because of NATO, rather than directly with the European Union. Because with the United States, we have a strong strategic and military partnership and a close cooperation through NATO. Plus, US troops and military infrastructures are in Romania at the Veselu, Mihail Cogălnicianu Air Base. Romanians and pro-European politicians from Bucharest, they don't see EU as a military alliance.
That's very interesting.
So cooperation exists through defense initiatives like SAFE and others, but the strong relationship is with the United States when it comes defense, SAFE, military troops, and so on.
I understand. So when it comes to Slovakia, I assume that defense and security is not as emotionally charged as in Poland, and the attitude to Russia is different. So can you say a little bit more on that, Natalia?
Well, it's a great paradox, actually, because Slovakia is directly bordering Ukraine, and still, Robert Fico government is pro-Russian. For the past year or so, Fico has met Vladimir Putin 3 times and even attended the 9th May celebrations in Moscow as the only EU leader. That is something even Viktor Orban didn't do. And that is also our main issue. Government, for whatever reason, opts from calling Russia a threat and instead keeps communicating pro-Russian narratives, keeps doubting European military aid to Ukraine, claiming like there is no military solution to the conflict. It's very illogical, really, because what are you supposed to do when someone attacks you? Ukrainians need to defend themselves, and while doing so, they're also defending us. So it seems like they are forgetting this. And yeah, this then poses a great issue for making people understand why a higher defense spending is even needed. Because how can you make Slovaks understand that you need to put more money into tanks rather than to schools or other civil sectors if you refuse to say that there is a country, namely Russia, that sees us as an enemy, poses an existential threat to us, and so we need to protect ourselves. And according to the last year's opinion poll conducted by Focus Agency, 71% of Slovaks opposed increasing defense spending at the expense of social programs. So this is the situation here. So our government refuses to mention Russia in any negative way. Honestly, we don't really understand why, because even Robert Fico hasn't always been this pro-Russian as he is today. This is his 4th government, and during the previous ones, he was actually very pro-EU and pro-NATO, so who knows? And also one thing, considering the public mood, the government may be partly playing to the pro-Russian sentiment that remains present among a segment of Slovak population. The sentiment here is really similar to that in Bulgaria, actually. It has historical roots. For example, in 19th century, Slovak national leaders advocated for pan-Slavism, and this was later reinforced by a sense of gratitude for the, quotes, liberation of Slovakia from Nazi forces by the Soviet army in 1945.
That's very interesting because elections in Bulgaria show that there is this sentiment towards Russia very strong there as well. Yeah, so moving to SAFE, Security Action for Europe mechanism, I would like to say that, as I mentioned earlier, Poland strongly advocated for creation of this mechanism, and the government still sees it as one of its major successes. But at the same time, there is also a paradox in Poland, because in no other country SAFE sparked as much political controversy as in Poland. Because, as I also mentioned before, there is both the president and the government, they have slightly different vision when it comes to defense spending, how the defense spending should look like. And the president, Karol Nawrocki, believes that the European Union is overstepping its competences and that SAFE may be used to influence how Poland allocates its defense spending. And in this respect, it may limit our national sovereignty. That's how he sees SAFE. And he also argues that the conditionality provision in SAFE may be used as a tool of political pressure, and it may make that the spending of the funds will be dependent on some vaguely defined criteria, as he puts it. And some other experts also criticize SAFE because it is based on loans, and in this respect, it increases public debt. In the end, the president vetoed the law implementing SAFE, and it does not mean that Poland will not get the funds, because we are still getting the money and we are expected even to be the largest beneficiary, but it does make things more complicated for the government to implement SAFE, because as it seems now, they will have to proceed without a dedicated legal framework. At the same time, the presidential camp proposed alternative sources of financing, for example, through the National Bank of Poland. But the government is very skeptical about this and is determined to move forward with SAFE regardless. So yes, we are still proceeding with SAFE, but there is really political chaos around this, and it sparked really big controversies. So that's the situation in Poland. And I would like to ask you how the situation looks in your countries, because I assume that debate around SAFE are not as heated in Romania and Slovakia as it is in Poland. But probably there were also some controversies. And Natalia, could you say more about the debate around SAFE in Slovakia?
Unfortunately, unlike in your country, where the loan has been held up by the president, or in Hungary, where the Commission has yet to approve the plan, SAFE has not triggered significant political drama in Slovakia. Slovakia is a part of a SAFE program with a total allocation over 2.3 billion euro. And this actually enjoys quite a broad support from both the governing coalition and the opposition. So that's a good news. And yes, the mechanism now is set to fully or partially finance 9 Slovak investment projects. The largest share will go around 1.8 billion of euro, will go to off-road military trucks. Additional money will then go towards new weapon systems or counter-drone capabilities. So overall, there are no great issues. Our plan has been approved by the Commission quite smoothly, but there is still one questionable part of this plan that we have. There's actually a framework contract under which Slovakia aims to become a major EU ammunition supplier with a potential value of up to 58 billion of euros, not million, but billion. Slovak Ministry of Defense signed this agreement for 7 years with a company which is partly owned by the state, partly by Michal Sternat of Czechoslovak Group. The company's name is ZVS Holding. However, there are several questions regarding that. Jan Kuciak Investigative Center, based in Slovakia, has pointed to contradictions in government claims about how many countries are actually interested in this project. Also, there are doubts around production capabilities and also around surrounding development, because the thing is that this framework contract was signed shortly before the company went public on stock market in Amsterdam, which significantly raised its perceived value. Both the company and the ministry deny there was some kind of calculation behind it, but who knows?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Sebastian, about Romania. Romania is getting also a very big share in SAFE funding. Poland gets almost 44 billion of euros, and Romania, what I know, gets the second biggest share of SAFE funding. And generally, it's seen as an opportunity. But from what I heard, there are some practical concerns regarding rising costs and transparency of contracts. Can you say a bit more about this?
Yes, Romania is getting around 16.6 billion euros from SAFE funding, and there have been reports of price increases of up to 30% in certain negotiations, especially in large equipment contracts. So another concern is how contracts are awarded and managed, because there have also been public discussions about ensuring that projects meet clear eligibility and origin rules, so that EU money does not simply go to non-European suppliers through indirect channels. Another central question is whether Romania will actually gain economically beyond military equipment, whether local industry will benefit or remain mostly a buyer of foreign systems. The Romanian government has explicitly stated that a key goal is to ensure as much production as possible is done domestically, so here in Romania. Another problem we have in Romania is that there are no public data about companies because national security is invoked by officials. Officials just have promoted the idea that a large share of safe fund projects should involve Romanian companies, either as producers or suppliers. And the government estimates that more than a half of the funds could circulate within the country through industrial participation and infrastructure projects.
Same in Poland. They say that around 80% they want to invest in Poland. Okay, so thank you very much for this engaging discussion. And there is no doubt that defense will remain a key topic in public debate for a long time, I assume, especially on the eastern flank. It is something that we'll be coming back to in our podcast for sure. The next episode of our podcast is coming up in a month, so stay tuned. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss it. This was EastFlank Podcast. Thank you very much for listening.